This is Jeff Mucci with RCR Wireless News, and we're here today with Tim Lynch, who is a lead designer with Nuance Communications. Is that right?
That's right.
So Tim, welcome to Austin. Welcome to the RCRatx Studio Lounge.
Thanks for having me.
During South by Southwest Interactive. So I want to do a short segment. We do a segment called Gigs, where we really talk about what people do for a job. So here you came from the UX agency side to a very technical engineering-oriented company.
Yep.
What's your title? And then let's talk about what you actually do.
Sure. So I am lead designer for Nuance's mobile and consumer business. Right? In my day-to-day, we design out speech experiences for sort of visualizing and making real some of the sort of innovative and core functionality that we have in our speech platform.
What are some of the tools that you use, tools of the trade, if you will?
Sure. So, you know, our team is made up of user experience designers, interaction designers, and those are the people who sort of pull together the conceptual frameworks for the products, the experiences really that we have, and you know, some of the outputs that they have, and myself as a designer as well, you know, are things like wireframes, sitemaps, pulling together personas, you know, and we tend to use tools like OmniGraffle or Adobe Illustrator or Visio, you know, depending on the platform and depending on the needs of the customer, right, to create this, you know, this sort of documentation, specifications, you know, early lower fidelity prototypes to test. You know, our team and myself as well, you know, we're also made up of visual designers, right, who you know, on one hand sort of put the polish or the veneer on an experience, but I view it as more than that. Obviously, it's sort of this is making it real, right, and sort of creating a holistic sort of, you know, experience, tying it into sort of branding and what have you, and good user practices. And you know, day to day I just spend my time in Adobe Photoshop, right, Adobe Illustrator. Sometimes we get into prototyping tools. You know, there's a lot of new prototyping tools online, like Pixate, for instance, or we dive into Adobe's, you know, Adobe's Flash, right, to get some prototypes done. We also have dialogue designers on our team too, and it's interesting because, you know, from my experience, dialogue design at first felt sort of like an alien, sort of new sort of realm. This isn't part of the designer's toolkit, right? This is sort of, these are words, these are spreadsheets. This isn't necessary design. But you know, I realized early on that you know, some designers work in pixels. Other designers, if you're a researcher, work with data. You know, others work with wireframes. But dialogue design is really sort of fundamental to the design process, especially at Nuance, a speech company, in that you know, they are telling the story. They are using words to create these relationships, which are just sort of critical to the experiences that we're building. Right?
How long have you been with Nuance?
It'll be 5 years in the spring.
And you said this was the first product job you had. Talk to me about that transition and the cultural awakening of going to a highly technical engineering company.
Yes, and it's my expectation going into, you know, starting at Nuance from the agency world was definitely, okay, this is going to be a change, right? This is a product company. I'm going to be focused on the product for long periods of time, right? And like I said, you know, came from the consulting world where, you know, as a designer, you know, the way I work, you know, it's really enjoyable because you get to, you know, jump from project to project and really sort of build up a big mass of sort of different experiences. You know, very quickly I realized that, you know, Nuance as a product company is really sort of like the consulting job of my dreams, right? Because, you know, it's not the you're a webmaster and you will work on this website for the next 5 years. It is a vast product portfolio, lots of different customers, internal sort of innovative conceptual work tied with long-term you know, big customer engagements. You know, so you get to you get the breadth and spectrum of projects that I really like as a designer to sort of keep my eyes open. And then of course just the space that Nuance is in, right? Speech, that sort of emergent, interaction paradigm. It sounds lofty, but, reimagining how people interact with technology, their world, right? That to me is one of the supremely sort of exciting things about working at Nuance, right? It's not a product company per se, it's an experience company.
Interesting. Where'd you go to school?
I got my journalism degree at Ithaca College in upstate New York. So.
And how'd you get into design?
I've always had an artistic background. I almost went to art school, if that counts.
Right.
But, interestingly, when I was going to school, I got involved in the computer lab at school back in the mid to late 90s. Put our school newspaper online.
Mm-hmm.
Dabbled in front-end coding. Came out of school and at the initial sort of peak of the sort of web development, e-commerce sort of gold rush.
Mm-hmm.
Spent a lot of time doing front-end development, always with an eye towards design, and just sort of gradually focused my career on visual design and interaction design.
Got it. You're involved in the mobile experience for Nuance. What was the biggest eye-opener when you started working on these fairly intense technical mobile experience projects?
Sure.
What was the big surprise? What was the big aha for you, if you had any?
So I've been thinking about that a lot recently, just being at South by Southwest, hearing, lots of inspirational sort of talks about things like this. And I think for me, and I was trying to formulate this morning, actually, to me, we want people to, as designers, and this is sort of an esoteric sort of goal as a designer, right? We want people to understand that speech can be a modality, right? Speech can be an input mechanism by which you interact with your technology. And that's one sort of aspect of design. But I think speech is actually, when we think about speech, we think about conversational systems, right? And it's actually, so it's a two-way conversation you're having with speech, and the technology can talk to you and you can talk to it. So speech can be a modality, but also speech is the experience, right? We in thinking about, emerging devices, speech becomes the experience. We can move away from, a reliance on, visual design and visual sorts of interfaces, which sort of pains me to say as a visual designer, right? But I think there's a lot of, really interesting and almost, magical sorts of experiences that can really change the world. And that's been sort of an aha moment, right? Not necessarily, throwing away my history of a visual design, all my experience, but just sort of understanding that there's a lot more sort of interesting doors opening up.
Interesting. So as a young baby boomer myself, I want to talk about the evolution of kind of person to machine text conversations. And so I'll give you a couple milestones, then I want you to tell me where you think it's going. But, as a kid, 2001 Space Odyssey, you've got this conversations going on between humans and computers. And then fast forward to, I think, the late 80s, early 90s, you had Sprint and Candace Bergman, the first iteration of talking to your phone and the phone calling somebody, literally call home. And it was very kludgy, didn't work very well. The speech recognition was there, but Candace Bergman was a great spokesperson, and Sprint has always been a great product company. Going back to their pin drop, and I remember, just as a sidebar, when they came out with this thing called the camera phone, I was like, who on earth would use a camera phone? But so that Sprint moment, and then with Apple, with the Siri, and now everyone is following behind them in this human to machine conversation. Blue sky for me, where's this going?
Yeah, so I think I think right now we're sort of in a, I mean, I think it's a great experimental, exciting period, right, where people are, you know, trying new things and really setting the groundwork for some really interesting types of interactions. I think we're definitely going to be moving away from, excuse me, you know, the world of speech applications, right? You know, so thinking about our Dragon mobile assistant, right? That's an application. It's sort of you the user, you have to go to the application, you have to invoke the speech, you have to invoke speech. And I'm not, you know, I'm fine with that, right? But I think what we're going to be moving to is more sort of ubiquitous, natural, you know, interactions where speech is a fundamental part of those interactions. You know, when you think about the Internet of Things, right? When you think about this sort of explosion of connected devices, everything sort of being connected, right? And you imagine a world where, you know, it's not just light bulbs, it's not just your toaster, it's not just your oven, it's not just your phone. You have sort of ambient intelligence is sort of in the air around you, in the walls, in the, you know, everywhere, right? You can imagine an experience.
Ambient, what was the word you used?
Ambient experience.
There you go, okay.
Right, yeah. You can imagine there's going to be a need for a consistent way to interact with these things, right? And we view speech, you know, as a very sort of natural way to interact with these things because, you know, nothing new here, right? Like speech is one of the most natural ways that we know how to communicate, right? We are, as the book says, we are wired for speech, right? But speech also, like I was saying earlier, speech as an interaction, as the interface, is invisible. It pushes the interface into the background, and so we can just sort of communicate directly with these experiences. And the system, and if it's two-way, these systems can communicate back to us, right? And I think also that, you know, one of the things also that I think has been an interesting eye-opening sort of experience for me. Is the realization that, you know, speech in and of itself, you know, I never want to view speech as the solution. You know, I think it's important that we respect and we pay homage to, you know, the other types of modalities that are out there. Use speech where it makes sense. You know, leverage and really explore how speech can work with some of the, you know, the more magical sorts of experiences that you have, you know, being created by all of these great product companies and innovative sort of firms and academic, you know, research institutions, whether it's, you know, gesture or facial recognition or, you know, motion or, you know, all of these things, and just understanding where speech works, right? You know, I don't imagine a world where we do nothing but talk to our technology.
Right.
But I think where it makes sense, you know, speech can work very well with all of these other types of technology.
Well, Tim, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for sharing your experiences with me. Again, enjoy your time here in Austin.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.